Hey guys, my name is LocoDoco, the better looking host of Listen Loco, and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
Svenskeren was the reigning MVP most valuable player of the LCS at the time that Jack Etienne, one of the Cloud9 owners, traded him in the off-season to new franchise Evil Geniuses. Now, it's incredibly rare in the history of League of Legends that you would trade such a player, an MVP, and then go on to win and end up basically with the better player in his role the next split, especially if the better player is essentially a rookie. Blaber had never played an entire split as a starter in LCS in Cloud9. He had shown strong potential, certainly as a sob in specific matches, apparently in scrims at Worlds, but he also clearly had his flaws and his inexperience with short times, and sometimes he went too far with some of the things he attempted in the game that other professional junglers probably wouldn't even attempt. Now, he had played at Worlds. We'd seen some of the positives, we'd seen some of the negatives, but they'd lost the main games that he played. And as such, this was a move that from the outside, it had a lot of question marks written all over it. This could really have gone many different directions. So the background to the move is Svenskeren is a very established player in Western League of Legends. He's been one of the great junglers in the Western region. When he was in Europe, he was a really strong rookie himself when he came up through the Copenhagen Wolves team. Then when he was in SK Gaming in Season 4, he was one of the main carries of the team, one of the best players in the jungle role. In Season 5, when he got Forgiven, it was him and Forgiven were basically like the hard carry individual players, and he really was a stud. That was when he had that invading duelist style where the joke was he was just the ward on the map for you, and he would go, but it was ward that went and killed the opponent and fucked up the other jungler. He's a multiple time champion in the game. He's been in tons of semi-finals in Europe. Then he's obviously won all those championships with TSM, Season 6, Season 7. He was a contender with Cloud9 in obviously the years following that. He became the MVP last split, but you know what? Yeah, he had hard times towards the end of his time in TSM. He was somewhat blamed and scapegoated for their poor performances internationally. He was rehabilitated in Cloud9, and you know what? That in itself's a reason to keep him, right? That's found money. You took a player that someone else didn't want, they thought was a problem, was an issue, wasn't playing well enough, and you rehabilitated him. Sure, you didn't get the international performance out of him, just like TSM didn't, but you had him playing at a much better level than he was at the end in TSM. So the story goes that he would have stayed in Cloud9 if Jack had gone and gotten him any of the players on this list. Mostly, he had to make the team of the players. So it wasn't even just get one player, it was get most of them. Now, these were basically some of the biggest superstar names in the world, and they're some of the best Asian players in the entire world, and the most expensive players in the world. So as a result, for financial reasons, after hearing that, Jack decided to go with Blaber, this hot rookie that he had waiting as a backup, and sell Svenskeren, not least because at the same time in the offseason, he was trying to figure out his bot lane scenario. So that allowed him to finance the Vulcan deal, the 1.7 million buyout or whatever it was. And as a result, that's why it wasn't really a gamble. Like I say, pivot here rather than gamble. When you know the business angle behind it, Svenskeren giving all those names and basically saying these need to be my teammates, not even just get one for me, that's basically subtext for trade me because maybe someone else will do that. You look at who Jack traded him to, yeah, you know what, that's actually a team that might be able to get one of those players in the future for Svenskeren. They might be willing to pay King's ransom. They were for Svenskeren and Zeyzal. So this was a big time pivot though. Let's not sugarcoat that in any way. They lost the MVP of the league, a guy who was controlling both his own game and generally the games he was playing in, and they brought in someone who's basically still a rookie. And you might imagine, if you give him more games, a bunch of those are going to probably be int games, right? They're going to be games where he just fucks up and his experience shows, and actually now has to play every single matchup, and he's not preparing for one specific game or being told in advance you're going to play when maybe the opponent don't know you're going to play. So you look in the history of this kind of a move. Well, in Cloud9 themselves, they previously took that jungle role, which had Meteos as one of the best junglers, then High came in just to shot call, but at least he's giving shot calling to the team. Then you had Rush, who everyone hoped would work out, but actually that just fell apart. And then they had Meteos again. Then who did they come with? They came with contracts, right? Young, hungry jungler, who's willing to make a lot of plays, had the initiative end of the game. It just didn't have very good decision making and would sometimes fuck up an int. But that only worked out short term. It worked early when he basically had winning lanes, and after that, it didn't really work that well. If you look at his career since, they were right not to keep him. Then you look when TSM themselves replaced Svenskeren, they got Mike Young. That didn't work at all. It was a bust. Then they got Greg. I would say he's a bust in terms of all the injury aspects and how many years people have wasted investing in him. But I would just say generally, you can just say these players were not up to par of what a TSM, or in this case a Cloud9 level team would want. Team Liquid, when they just replaced Xmithy, thought they were getting an upgrade mechanically with Broxer, had their issues. CLG, when they replaced Xmithy, let him go. They brought in the big boy DOhDoubleG, right? Collapsed their team emotionally completely, even though they were fucking right near the top of the league. The track record is very risky for taking these established veteran top junglers who have all the experience, played loads of teammates, done all the types of games, been on the national level, been on domestic level, won championships, with these young hot rookies who are the flavour of the month now, who look like there's lots of potential, but when you put them in a full series or put them in a full season, you put them in the playoffs or at Worlds, maybe they just collapse in on themselves and you find out there are Mike Young, there are contracts. I wouldn't say Broxer because he obviously has done big things. So you can see though, DOhDoubleG, he has yet to do any really huge things outside of LCS. It's not necessarily as obvious as it might seem that you do in fact go with Blaber in that scenario. You can let someone else take that gamble. You could get a decent price for him. He showed some promise. People want NA talent in the jungle in those supportive roles. Then you can let them take the fall if it blows up. In doing so, you might potentially eliminate one of your rivals, a TSM, one of those environments where rookie junglers are known to potentially fail. Instead, if you're Cloud9, if you're Jack, you could pivot to getting a reliable veteran. You could try and do an upgrade, as I often suggest you could. The only people I could see as being upgrades in any context is like Xmithy in terms of veteran experience and has performed internationally a number of times. Meteos, self-directed, some guy who doesn't seem as though mentally he's going to give up much. DOhDoubleG, just raw mechanics would be the answer. If you wanted to go somewhere between the two and take someone probably not as good as Svenskeren, but pretty good and can almost do a good Svenskeren impression at times, Thorin, obviously available. So what happened? Well, the pivot worked, didn't it, right? Because listen, you know what? Blaber did have some int moments. I don't know about games, but he had some int moments. But now that you see how they were when he plays a full split, they were more in the vein of a Caps int when Caps plays mid lane, where it's like you're limit testing, and if it works, the other team's going to have no answer whatsoever. You're going to get some outrageous players off, get initiative on the map you should never have in theory, and be able to get kills at times in the game that probably shouldn't be possible, which also, by the way, then makes that something the opponent has to think about. So you take that initiative, you pressure that opponent, and then you see all the wins. It's no wonder they're not just winning these games. Cloud9 were winning in dominant fashion. They were incredibly dominant team. One of the most dominant to ever play in LCS. Then you add in Svenskeren and Niski. Obviously, Niski had only just come into Cloud9, right? Svenskeren was part of the transition period to get Niski to a top level. He'd just been a good, promising player in Europe, but nowhere near an MVP caliber mid laner. Niski and Blaber ended up working together really well, just as apparently Niski and Svenskeren worked together, albeit differently, obviously. It helps that Niski obviously has a champion Ocean. He's very versatile in that respect. He works with his jungler, apparently. That seems like a primary factor as to why they've done so well, all these junglers with him. You could call him Doinby-esque in that regard. He understands the concept of moving with the jungler, working with the jungler, not just playing for lane and then demanding the jungler do something or occasionally collaborating. He himself even liked on some of the talk shows where we brought that up, the Doinby comparison. Like, he enjoyed watching this guy play and tried to take some tips from what is currently still the reigning world champion mid laner. So the 2v2 has obviously been so powerful in this split that what a perfect time for this move to come to fruition and manifest these kind of results. Then you've got to add in, I'll say as a side, in isolation, I've been very critical of many of Reaper's drafts over the years because he does have that very unique way of seeing the draft, totally unorthodox way of drafting. Sometimes he will gamble and clearly put his players in weird scenarios they wouldn't necessarily choose, but because he thinks that that's a better matchup, that's a better comp, this is some angle that if you play it out the right way, if everyone plays exactly correctly, then it will actually be the better draft and you just win out immediately. Well, you know what? With the way Blaber plays, these kind of crazy Reaper drafts sometimes basically allowed you to snowball the game from the draft into the first 5 minutes, and suddenly 10 minutes in, you've almost won the game. So I would say they're so extreme in a sense that I think actually Blaber, being this incredibly sharp and in this case precise tip to the spear, made them, if anything, supercharged them. It makes you kind of see maybe what Reaper was trying to do in past teams, but he just didn't have the personnel for it, which is a flaw as a coach, but it doesn't matter now. He's got the personnel. So the implications for international play, I think, are quite interesting here, because this is one area I do get the upgrade. If I'd known that Blaber would be a really good top, potentially the best jungler in the domestic region, then I'd be up for this pivot, because when you go to international play, I have always been quite skeptical of Svenskeren, actually. He has had his issues internationally pretty much his whole career. His confidence seems to be paper thin when he plays against the best Asians. He reminds me of like Doublelift back in the day in that sense. It's like when he knows the other jungler's supposed to be better than him, supposed to have better mechanics than him, it feels like he doesn't even play up to his par and then just see what happens. He already collapsed. He's mentally like out of the game, just waiting for them to do something. And he's not the same jungler that in LCS and EU LCS could be the best jungler. I think in that sense, he's also too Korean in his style. Sometimes he'll be a bit more conservative because he's uncomfortable. In that sense, Blaber, especially if he can maintain this style and this ferocity and this just fearlessness to go in, I actually think he gives you more of a chance if you're Cloud9 internationally, because it gives you that chance to just run up to the bully and just punch him right in the face immediately. Maybe knock him the fuck out, just catch him and they're out. So that obviously will require him to maintain this high confidence, but we've heard these stories that he's wrecking like Canyon and the Damn One Gaming guys in scrims at Worlds. Now, I don't think that always showed up in the actual Worlds matches. He tried some of those players that just didn't work out in terms of the outcome, but if you can maintain that, if you can kind of keep this guy focused and not let too much of the side stuff get in, whereas in that sense, yeah, you know what, Svenskeren had baggage. He was somewhat damaged goods on the international level. By the way, a lot of Western players are. I mean, so many of them went through those like 3, 4, 5 years where you were going to get battered by the Koreans, you were going to lose, they were going to make you look silly, they were going to punish every mistake, and so it made you just afraid to do anything. It's like playing versus a boxer that has a god tier jab, and you know if I throw anything out there, he just punches me in the face constantly like that, and I can't do anything about it. Like, if that's intimidating, it's going to make you turtle up. It's going to make you just look for the occasional shot you can go for. You're not going to have your normal style. Maybe you're a guy who throws haymakers. Maybe you're a freewheeling person. Maybe you're someone who plays first to play offense than defense. You think it's bullshit. Doesn't matter in that kind of scenario. So a lot of people kind of have been broken by the Koreans and the Asians. Blaber doesn't know anything about that. He's coming in the seasons where top lane and mid are going ham. Western players have sick players. We can do all sorts of things and you can win games against Koreans directly. So for the future, this is what's interesting, because it's certainly not a done deal that Blaber's going to be better than Svenskeren over his career and be a great jungler actually. The key for me is I want to know how other players in future Cloud9 lineups, because it seems like Blaber's going to be the foundation at this point, how they, especially because he's North American, I want to know how they'll play around him. That's a potential concern I have. Like, what happens when you get players that, like, if you get a mid laner later that doesn't want to play with the jungle as much, he just wants to play as lane out, or he just wants to be the monster carry and you service him. Yeah, that might be a consideration in terms of follow-up, in terms of how much Blaber can do some of these things, because if there wasn't a Niski with him on some of these moves, it would look like a mad in, and you would just be like, man alive, that's suddenly not fearless, that's irresponsible actually. So he must continue to develop as a player. I think he has to round his game out a little bit, or at least kind of like sometimes pick and choose his spots. I've seen it way too often that you get this player who comes out who essentially is a rookie. He plays his first full splits looking really nice. Wow, where did they find this guy? The young, confident jungler. He's popping off. He's got the winning lanes and he uses that pressure to his advantage. And then he regresses next split. He regresses next year. Sometimes they never get to that level again. Eventually they realize what life's like. They stop being kind of like beginner's luck. Like, my joke is it's like the jungler in that scenario is like the Wacky Races character. Runs off the edge of the cliff, Wile E. Coyote, and then he looks down, not Wacky Races, like Hanna-Barbera or whatever. And then they look down, oh my god, I'm on the edge of the cliff, oh, I'm off the cliff, and then it's only when they look that they fall. That's what it feels like sometimes to be a pro jungler, and some of them never come back from that fall. So I will say, the eye test suggests he does look better than Contracts even did in Cloud9, than Mike Young did in TSM, or forget even TSM, like physically, he was fairly shit in TSM, when he was in P1, etc. Then you got to add in, it's not like he's playing on his own, right? Before he ever gets to play with those players, he's got Niski who can work with him. He's got Licorice, a guy who seems like one of the most well-rounded top laners to ever play from LCS, and that includes the foreigners to come in. He's got Reaper as his coach, someone who can work with him, someone who's worked with junglers his whole career. These people can be massively influential on Blaber's development, on keeping him on the right track, on helping him round out some other elements of his game, and training him for those future teammates or coaches that he might have. So think about how gangster this is on the part of Jack. Someone who's rightly been criticised at times for seemingly going with, yes, the smart business move, but that means that you end up with like, I've got the second or third best player at mid or top, or I've got a pretty good support. And when you add it all together, yeah, you've got a pretty good team. You've got the second or third best team, and kind of makes sense, right? But you're not the Team Liquid winning. You're not TSM with the biggest superstar names that you're willing to bust out the money for. And that was something that people criticised him for. That's why it's so many years between championships. They were kind of a team that was just close to winning, but close but no cigar type scenario. So think how gangster this is. Jack was able to let the reigning MVP leave his team. He was able to sign a player for the highest buyout ever. He was able to make a profit on those two transactions combined. And then he was able to win LCS in dominant fashion with the player he replaced the MVP with looking better than the player that was the outgoing MVP. The tragedy of all this is, Jack will never get his crack at MSI because Cloud9's never been to an MSI. They basically went to the All-Stars 2014, which is kind of the precursor to MSI, but that was the infamous tournament where High's long collapsed, so they had to bring Link in, who certainly was a better mid laner, but wasn't a better shot caller. They didn't actually live up to their level in as much as people thought they were going to beat that OMG team and go to the finals, and so this would have been his chance. We're also in a world where the Asians aren't unbeatable. Would have been a very interesting proposition, as I'm sure a lot of content that people are going to do is going to explore. But what a gangster pivot this was. This video was kindly supported by Alexander Rao, Dean Tanglis, Emanuel Särnbratt, JDubs, NateDOhDoubleG, the Puyallup Tribe, Tobias Bernasconi, Xinged, and a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my shows? Maybe ask a question in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers? Who are the guests on my next content? Maybe you want to take part in one of those donated discussions with me where we go really deep into the weeds. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Scrilluminati today in the description box link below.